Just want to thank you for joining us on this continuing series on the civilization of life versus the civilization of death. And we're with Father Frank Pavone, the founding director of Priests for Life, and we're journeying through this document on Humanae Vitae, human life. Father, we're still on section 10. What would you like to share?
Yes, well, we've looked at the fact that the document says that responsible parenthood means that you plan your family, but you do so, first of all, with an inclination toward generosity. God is a generous God. Parents are to be generous parents.
Right.
You have as many children as you can possibly handle, and that could mean the changing of your lifestyle in order to accommodate the gift of more lives. But then it also points out that there are times when, for medical reasons, financial reasons, psychological reasons, that a couple can say responsibly before God, okay, at this time we cannot have another child. But in saying that, they cannot use the artificial means of contraception to bring about that decision. They have to have profound respect for the moral law, which says that the act has always got to be open to life. Now, we'll look in the future at natural family planning in more detail, but basically the difference between that and contraception is that in the natural methods, God closes the door, and in artificial methods, we close the door. And the teaching of the encyclical is we don't have the authority to close the door. We can choose to step away from the act altogether at times when it may bring forth life, but we cannot close the door on our own authority. This leads into then a reflection of the Holy Father about conscience, a word which is often very confused, especially on these issues, because we think of parents having children. Oh, this is a very private, a very personal thing. It's none of our business. It's the couple's business, and they have to decide in all good conscience. Well, yes and no. Here's what the Pope says. Responsible parenthood also and above all implies a more profound relationship to the objective moral order established by God, of which a right conscience is the faithful interpreter. The responsible exercise of parenthood implies, therefore, that husband and wife recognize fully their own duties towards God, towards themselves, towards the family, and towards society in a correct hierarchy of values. In the task of transmitting life, therefore, they are not free to proceed completely at will, as if they could determine in a wholly autonomous way the honest path to follow. But they must conform their activity to the creative intention of God, expressed in the very nature of marriage and of its acts, and manifested by the constant teaching of the Church. Now that's a mouthful.
That's clear teaching, though. I mean, not what we're certainly... not the way average Catholic is living today. They're certainly not living by these norms. And this is
they're living by the norm that says we'll decide.
Yeah.
Period. And the Church says, the Church doesn't say an absolute no to that. If a couple is saying, well, we're going to decide, period, the Church says, well, just take the period away. You're still going to decide. But you're going to decide in the light of a bigger picture, which is that God has certain norms in place because He's the creator of marriage. First of all, God is the one who gave you to one another. Right. He's the one who made you. And you think you chose your spouse. You did, but only because God chose your spouse. And so it is with children. You think you're deciding whether or not you're going to have a child, but really, God has a plan from all eternity about which children are going to come into the world. And He's the gatekeeper. Right. He's entrusting to you the opportunity to freely choose a large family, or as large a family as you can accommodate. But as you're choosing with a right conscience. Now, a lot of people say, well, I'll decide in my conscience. And what they mean by that is, whatever I think is right, I will do. Well, the conscience is really simply our mind making the decision at a certain moment what the right action is. And then once we've decided that, the next decision is to actually do the act.
Right.
But conscience, it needs to be informed, informed by the law of God, which comes to us not just from our own thoughts, comes to us through the authentic teaching of the Church, which is objective. It's in documents like this.
Yes.
It's in the talks of our Holy Father, the bishops, and so forth.
We've got the Catechism of the Catholic Church,
exactly.
which is so easy to refer to today.
It's so easy to look at.
So we can find out the truth. So the truth is not something we think. The truth is truth. I dropped these glasses, they're going to go down, not up. That's the truth.
Exactly.
And God has given us the Catholic Church to give us these moral laws that we must live by.
Right. I mean, the conscience is like a compass. I mean, if you're walking through the woods, you're following your compass. who's telling you what the right direction is? Well, the compass is telling you what the right direction is, but only because the compass is pointing the right way. The compass does not decide what the right direction is. A compass could be broken. And if the compass is pointing you north and it's really east, and you follow it, no matter how sincerely you think you're going in the right direction, you're not going to end up in the right place.
That's right. So we have to have that formed conscience, and therefore we do have to find out what the Church is teaching, not what the news is saying, and not because all the Catholics, we're just talking to Catholics, not non-Catholics out there too, and we're talking to everybody, but so few Catholics are following the Church's teachings here.
Right.
So few are following this, and because the vast majority are not going the right direction, you think, well, that's the right way, I'm going to follow the majority. Well, and somewhere in this document I saw that the gates to heaven are very narrow, and the Holy Father talks about that.
Right. The key point that the document makes as far as informing our conscience is at the end of the next section, section 11, the constant doctrine, Pope Paul said, of the teach is each and every marriage act must remain open to the transmission of life.
That's right.
Very clear, simple statement. Each and every marriage act must remain open to the transmission of life. Important for people to understand, the Pope is not saying that each and every marriage act must give rise to a new life. And some people think that.
It's just open to it.
Open to it, which means if God intends at that moment to bring about the conception of a new human being, the couple is to say, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. If he doesn't, the couple is to say, thank you, Lord. A gift is to be accepted and not rejected. But at the same time, a gift cannot be demanded. We can't say, I want to have a child. Okay, it's okay to want a child. I demand to have a child. We can't say that.
You can always open for adoption if you can't have a child.
Absolutely.
And this is a beautiful
that's another
form.
way.
Now, artificial insemination, what's the Church's teachings on that?
The Church teaches that there are ways that science can assist the reproductive capacity of the human being. And you know, this constantly what constantly changes is what kind of interventions are possible. Scientists are always working on developing ways of assisting fertility. So the Church does not say that it's wrong to assist fertility. What the Church says, it's wrong to replace the natural way of bringing about a child. So if a method, and this is generally speaking, if a method of assisted reproduction completely replaces the natural conjugal act, it is not permissible. If, however, it assists the natural act, it could be permissible. And what I would say in those cases is that the person has to look in each case at what specific intervention is being proposed. Artificial insemination, by that term, we usually understand the insemination of the reproductive cells totally independently of the marriage act. And that would be, of course, being that's a replacement, that would be immoral.
So the Church, the Church is open, and there is ways and means. Again, they can contact Priests for Life to find some of these things out too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And organizations like Dr. Tom Hilger's Pope Paul VI Center are experts in this.
Yes, because that's right, Paul Hilger's is very good, and because they're really onto what the Church is teaching on this area. So if women can't have children, this is an organization to get a hold of.
They know the Church is teaching, and they know the latest science.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, if you go to our website, we'll have a link to Hilger's John Paul II Institute there. That's very good. Well, Father, anything else you'd like to share in this section?
Well, another key statement of this encyclical is at the beginning of section 12. The teaching often set forth by my magisterium is founded upon the inseparable connection willed by God and unable to be broken by man on his own initiative between the two meanings of the conjugal act, the unitive meaning and the procreative meaning. That's a very important sentence of the encyclical. Unitive meaning, we come together to give each other love.
Right.
Two become one flesh. Procreative meaning, in coming together we can give rise to a new life. Now some people say, does the Church teach that the purpose of marriage is to have children? Well, Yes, but not exclusively. The purpose of marriage is a dual purpose, and these dual purposes are reflected in the marriage act, but also in many other acts, and that is to give love to one another, to give life to new children. Now, the unity here cannot be broken on our own initiative. Sometimes it's broken because one might be infertile, and certainly, as we know, the cycles of the woman's body mean that at times, every month she is infertile. But this does not mean that we can come in and close the door on our own initiative. Right. It's interesting that God put into the same act the power to express love and give life. Is it because God ran out of ideas? I mean, couldn't He have made it so that the couple could come together and show love, and then they would have to do something else if they wanted to have a child? Now, God doesn't run out of ideas. He can come up with all sorts of ways. So it's deliberate on His part that He put into the very same act that uniting power and that life-giving power. People have got to sit back and think about this. God put these things into the same act on purpose. Why on purpose? Well, because we know He's infinite. He could have done it differently.
This is the best way. I like the words it says here, man's most high calling, ordination toward man's most high calling to parenthood. So, this is, you're cooperating and bringing this child up to get to heaven. This is what you're doing. You want them to get to heaven. This is the whole thing. Yeah, you want a nice career. It's good to have a career. But don't forget, I never forget the Francis University, Father Mike Scanlon saying we're forming our young people here for careers, but we're forming them to show them how to get to heaven.
How to get to heaven.
This is so important. Well, Father, thank you.
God
bless you. And we just want to, again, walk the walk with you and trying to find true happiness, and the best way is God's way. It's the only way. We'll be right back.